First trip leads to allergic reaction. Yo, what's going on? It's someone that's someone, and welcome back to today's report. Today's report was sent in by Molemunch. The drug used, Dextromethorphan, at a dose of 40 cough gels. The route administration, orally, gender, male, and the setting, with friends, at KFC, and then mainly at their apartment. Okay, so we have another DXM report, which if these were classic robo gels at 30 milligrams each, this would have been a dose at 600 milligrams, a third plateau for most people. But Molemunch here notes that he was doing research lately and found out that the over-the-counter cough suppressant, DXM, can act as a mind-altering substance. He decides to take this pretty casually and heads over to see his friends without even letting them know what's up. This could have turned out really bad, as he had no idea how he would react with the DXM. But thankfully it didn't. It was only somewhat bad. So Molemunch ends up having an allergic response to the DXM, experiencing the common robo itch, but also having hives and puffiness, something that can pop up for a good handful. Basically what happened here is the DXM released too much histamine, and these effects popped up in response. It doesn't seem to be to any dangerous level, but it does lead him to have a somewhat discomforting experience. Beyond this, there are some strong dissociative effects experienced and described, making this for a pretty interesting first-time DXM report. We get to see a side of DXM we've only brought up a couple times before. I'm sure you'll find this interesting as we get a better look at what can go down within the DXM experience. So without further ado, let's dive right into this. I was very curious about DXM after reading many of the mind-altering effects on Earwood. I headed down to my local Walmart that was thankfully stocked with plenty of Robitussin cough gels and self-checkouts. I hopped in my car, where I immediately downed all 40 of the pretty red gels, the only thing I had ingested all day, and drove to a friend's apartment that was nearby. After arriving, I quickly sensed some tension between my friend and her boyfriend, but thought nothing of it. We sat around for about an hour talking, until my friend, let's call her Emmy, and her boyfriend, let's call him Sammy, both requested we head to KFC. I was pretty worried about this, due to them not knowing I took DXM. Terrible idea, but agreed. Once we had all got into Emmy's truck, I noticed an incredible itchy feeling all over my scalp and neck. I had tried to ignore it while Emmy and Sammy were bickering in the front seats, but after about 2 minutes, the feeling was too intense to ignore. I started to scratch like there was no tomorrow, only for both of them to look back at me and ask if I was okay. I said I was fine, just a bit itchy, and they asked why my face was so red. I was very confused, and pulled out my phone to see what was happening to me. My face was a bright red, and my eyes looked as if I just hit the fattest blunt to have ever existed. I said how I must have been allergic to something at their apartment, and said I would be fine. Once we got to KFC about 5 minutes later, I immediately got hit with a wave of nausea, and my hands had become swollen and itchy as well. They asked if I needed to be driven to the hospital, but I once again said I was fine due to the fear that the doctors there would know I was on something. We all walked out to the truck, and I noticed it was somewhat hard to walk. The best way I could describe it is as if I was trying to walk after a 5K run in space. I started to calm down and laugh at how silly I had felt, and stumbled my way into the establishment. As Emmy and Sam ordered their food, I started to feel an awesome warmth all around my body, as if I had been hugged by a hot iron. It did not hurt, but I felt that it should have. I asked Sammy if they had any tacos. I had no idea why I asked. I knew we were at KFC, and he laughed and said they didn't. I looked up at the menu above and was hit with another wave of nausea. I told the cashier I would just take a soda cup. As I reached for my wallet, I felt a numbness around my hands. At first, I felt a sense of extreme confusion, but came to the conclusion that it simply was what it was, nothing to be done about it. I fumbled around my wallet looking for my $5 bill, but couldn't seem to find it. Emmy looked over and told me I had dropped it on the floor and picked it up for me. I was again very confused. How did it fall out of my wallet? I thought. My friends must have noticed my extreme confusion and said it was okay. I paid for my cup and stumbled to the soda machine without getting my change. The cashier said I forgot my change, and I turned to her and said I was fine, thanking her for her wonderful service. I stared at the soda machine and looked deeply into each of the labels of soda. I started to imagine how each company could make such recognizable logos and admired how genius they were. I got some good old mug root beer and stumbled back to one of the booths. Both Sammy and Emmy started to argue again with each other about something I, no matter how much I tried, cannot remember. I instead focused intently on how each of them spoke. Each word coming from their mouths was so odd to me. It almost seemed foreign, but with a sense of familiarity. I thought these were merely vibrations, nothing more, and again started to itch my head violently. They turned and stared at me with one of the most "what the fuck" looks I've ever seen. I had recognized how this type of behavior was frowned upon, and how I must apologize in return so it may not tarnish my social standing. I never really thought like this before, so I have no idea why I was doing so. I mumbled out a quick "sorry" before scratching at my hands under the table. They got up to go get their food, and I had looked intently at their movements, their anatomy, their form and figure, wondering how everything moved so nicely, and how I could replicate the same in real life. Wait, real life? I thought. Am I not the same as them? Am I not human? What am I? How did I get here? And I mean, really get here? These types of thoughts crossed through my mind for quite some time, completely ignoring that my friends had sat back down and started talking to me. I can't remember what they were talking about, only that I had known they were talking, but was too caught up in my own questioning mind loop. I seemed to not want any answers to my questions, because each time I thought of one, another one arose from that question. Sammy tapped me on the arm and asked what was wrong with me. I simply looked at him and stated how I needed to use the restroom and how sorry I was for bothering them. They just looked at me confused and said it was okay. I stood up only to realize that I felt completely different than how I did before. I felt as if I was made out of nothing but moving parts. I was no longer whole, just independent limbs moving out of sync and very awkwardly. What I can only describe as, robotically juddered into the restroom and quickly sat down in one of the stalls. I started to take a piss, taking note how I could barely feel it. Wait, why am I sitting while taking a piss? Is this not the way I'm supposed to do it? I must stand and pee, like a man should. I quickly stood up, only to quickly fall onto the stall door. I had thanked myself that I had locked it without remembering how I did, and went to wash my hands. Looking down at my hands, I quickly noticed how they went from being somewhat swollen to full-on, bright red sausage fingers. I got worried and looked up to the mirror, only to see that, although my face was not as red, my eyes had become even more glassy and full pink. I got worried, and Robo walked back to the booth my friends were sitting at. They were still arguing, and I asked them why they were so upset at each other. In my mind, there was no reason to be angry at each other, and I was quickly able to apply this to my worry of my altered state. Everything would be okay, I was sure of it. They had started talking about what was bothering them, but I quickly interrupted them, saying how everything would be fine, just like it should. We should all get along, no need for fighting. This seemed to only confuse them more, so I thought this was okay if they didn't understand, and they eventually would. After they were done eating, we all walked back to the truck. They both noticed quickly how my walking was getting worse, and asked if I was on something. I felt a sense of guilt and how I needed to tell the truth. I had told them how I was on DXM, and apologized that I had not told them sooner. Although Sammy was clearly upset, Emmy told me it was okay, and how I should have told her sooner. I felt so much trust in Emmy, and sensed that we had just then formed a strong connection, almost as though we were on a similar wavelength. She drove us to her apartment and told me to lay down on the couch as she and Sammy sat down on her recliners. Sammy recommended that we watch a movie or play a game. I told him how I would love to watch the two of them play Call of Duty. They agreed and played split screen and went one-on-one with each other. I thought this is odd because they were only again fighting, only on a game instead of real life, but again told myself that everything would be okay. I laid back and watched them play before I had passed out on their couch. This was a very odd experience overall, and not close to what I expected. Once I woke up a few hours later, I still felt a bit off and had a really bad headache. I told them I was again sorry and drove home. I do not feel I gained much introspection from this trip or had that much of a good time. I also feel I must be, to some extent, allergic to the DXM or one of the dyes inside the cough gels, which might explain the swelling, redness, and itchiness. I'm not too sure I would do this again, maybe if I can find something that doesn't contain whatever I might have been allergic to.